Chief Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, was an outstanding gift to our generation. He gave us specifically the gift of a Torat Chaim. Torat Chaim means a Torah that's alive, that's vibrant, that's fresh. It's never trite or predictable, but that's vital, passionate, exciting, insightful, perspective-changing. The following tribute is a joint effort of the Orthodox Union, Yeshiva University, and the Rabbinical Council of America. Rather than present eulogies, which would inevitably fall short of this outstanding and exceptional target, we have chosen instead to bring together the voices of many American Jews who will each describe in a few words how Rabbi Sacks impacted them, how his teachings, his persona, the way he taught, the way he lived, the courage with which he brought Torah and values to his community, to our community, and to the world as a whole, how it elevated them and how it elevated their lives' work. We hope that this will in some way give a window into the impact of Rabbi Sacks on our community and be an appropriate expression of the grief and the loss that we all feel with his passing.
We have a mitzvah in the Torah in Parshas Kisah, "V'halachta b'drachav," we should go in the ways of Hashem. What does that mean? Why should you go in the ways of Hashem? Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu created us all b'tzelem Elokim, and He wants us to preserve that tzelem Elokim. So He told us, "V'halachta b'drachav," we have to study Tanakh and study the Gemara to see what are the ways of Hashem. Then the pasuk continues, "V'ro kalami haaretz," when all of the nations in the world will realize, Kishem Hashem Nikra Alecha, that you have succeeded in preserving your Tzelem Elokim, Shem Hashem Nikra Alecha, and we are supposed to be Or Lagoim. The Rabbi Yeshaya tells us we are Or Lagoim, and anything that the Nevi'im say has to be rooted in the Chumash. So this is the pasuk in the Chumash where it says we are supposed to serve as Or Lagoim. When all the nations in the world will see Kishem Hashem Nikra Alecha, we have succeeded in preserving our Tzelem Elokim, the Yaru Mimeko, they will learn from you, the Umm will learn from the Jewish people how to act with Yirah Shamayim. The Or Lagoim doesn't mean, Soloveitchik explained, it doesn't mean with respect to Shabbos and Kashrus and Taras HaMishpacha. It goes on Tzelem Elokim, it goes on honesty and integrity and work ethic and so on. This is what Lord Sacks accomplished. For so many years, the Jewish people have not been functioning B'kum Aseh as Or Lagoim. He published so much and he spoke so much in public about what Tzelem Elokim is all about and what Midas Tovos are and what Derech Eretz is. So he has represented the Jewish people and presented to the Ummah Ha'olam what Tzelem Elokim is all about.
Rabbi Sacks was a model for bringing authentic Torah values and wisdom into the broader public square. He engaged princes and prime ministers, religious leaders of all faiths, and in the United States, members of Congress, public intellectuals, and journalists.
For the Jewish community worldwide, Rabbi Sacks was the closest we get to royalty, a spiritual aristocrat with a regal bearing who inspired with his repeated calls for hope. He stepped down as Chief Rabbi of the United Hebrew Congregations of the Commonwealth in 2013, which enabled him to be, in effect and informally, the Chief Rabbi of the English-speaking Jewish world. And he was. People turned to his writings, his weekly essays on the Torah portion, his speeches, to experience intellectual transcendence, to feel intimacy with age-old tradition, to understand a difficult moment in time within a broad philosophical and historical sweep.
I came away with a very warm and special feeling about him, about the love and the concern that he had for all Jews that cross boundaries and borders and ideologies. He was truly a Klal Yisrael Jew who could speak convincingly to Jews of every stripe and from every sector.
His warmth, his dignity, his eloquence, his sense of people, and his understanding of the motivation and what captures people. Secular, religious, Jewish, non-Jewish. He was an exemplar of a dignified, representative of our people.
He felt no compunction whatsoever in reaching across the divide and communicating with the secular world, with the non-Jewish world, and speaking about his passion for God and for the Jewish people.
Rabbi Sacks, in my opinion, stood primarily for not just monotheistic Judaism, but ethical monotheistic Judaism. That our mission as Jews was to bring the values of Torah, the ethics of Torah, into our lives and into the larger world. And Rabbi Sacks, as much as anybody in our time, brought the Torah and its values into the world.
His whole life he was a mevakesh, wasn't happy with what he knew, but wanted to know more. That's what I learned from him, and that's one thing, there are many, that all of us could learn from him.
Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks, Zichron Livracha, mobilized his eloquence, erudition, insight, and scholarship to do battle on behalf of the Jewish people and the Torah.
He felt that there was no contradiction between science and technology and religion, because science and technology answers the what, Torah and religion in general answers the why.
To watch Rabbi Sacks present, to watch him give a shiur, or give a lecture, or sit on a panel, is to watch a towering scholar entirely immerse the totality of themselves within the moment. He would existentially connect to the material and to the audience, and he would remain entirely present in the moment until the very last person asked him the very last question as he was trying to walk out the door of that particular venue.
In writing the commentary for the NCSY Siddur, utilizing his translation, I was constantly in awe of the way Rabbi Sacks managed to find the most delicate and perfect translations. And we found not only were the translations a direct link to Rabbi Sacks, we constantly came back to his Torah to find inspiration for the commentary that we wrote for this Siddur.
Every day when I go to work, I try to remember Rabbi Sacks' teaching that we should lead by influence and lead by words and deeds, and not try to lead through orders and power.
Rabbi Sacks was unique, he was distinct, steeped in Torah, well-versed in Western philosophy, theology, culture, every area of knowledge. He gave Torah a vocabulary that resonated in this world, and he challenged every one of us to expand our thinking and to expand our vocabulary and the power of language, to be able to transmit the timeless Torah teachings in a way which would resonate, which would be palpable.
We've lost our rabbi, the rabbi who represented Or L'Goyim, light unto the nations.
I just remember that Rabbi Sacks was such an embodiment of Chachma and Derech Eretz. His house, I remember, was covered with books everywhere, and it was really amazing to hear points of Torah from him, and he just was so humble, so nice, so warm, so welcoming, and I can never forget that experience.
Greater than his scholarship, greater than his brilliance, was his humanity, his Derech Eretz, his love of people and his commitment to be there when it mattered most.
He did not hesitate from becoming the most profound and eloquent voice, the most forceful voice, for the struggle against anti-Semitism and mobilizing people of every faith, leaders and followers alike, to stand against the oldest of hatreds.
Jewish history conveys painful lessons about the dangers of being different, about how the people who look and live differently become easy targets during periods of challenge. Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks' writings gave me, and so many others, the courage to set aside the fear, for which we are profoundly grateful.
Rabbi Sacks was perhaps the most articulate ambassador of Jewish values in our time, but his words were not merely the instruments of eloquence. They were agents of persuasion, catalysts to action. And Rabbi Sacks, more than a teacher, was a leader whose words and whose life lifts us all.
A number of years ago, Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks was the guest keynote speaker at NCSY Staff Conference. That day, Rabbi Sacks and Lady Elaine entered the building, and instantly their presence was felt. The magnetism, their grandeur, Their regalness, it was palpable. The support that Lady Elaine provided to Rabbi Sacks has left all of us with a legacy of his mastery and eloquence of Torah ideas, something that will be studied and felt, and something that people will grow from for generations to come.
My mother, who always struggled with her own spirituality and belief in God, in her later years, she found the writings of Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks. Every week she would read his parsha, and she would ask questions of the local Aish Torah rabbi. His words resonated with her, and so many people I know who also were on their Jewish journeys and really had major struggles and could never get over hurdles. It was really Rabbi Sacks. His Torah spoke to them.
Rabbi Sacks was as close as I ever came to having a Rebbe. His Divrei Torah transformed my understanding of Tanakh and were a central part of my and my family's Shabbos for so many years now.
Rabbi Sacks wrote of how there are two ways to keep warm on a cold night. One can wear a thick coat, warming only oneself, or one can light a fire and warm those surrounding as well. He spoke of our obligation to choose to light a fire because, he said, the moral life is one we share with those around us. We're responsible for the society of which we are a part, and for being a blessing to those around us. He spoke of the dignity of difference, how Jews, having once and often been strangers, must welcome the stranger, the one who is different and most needs the acceptance of community. His words convey that we don't have the liberty to live our lives as Gaulish Jews, who celebrate religion solely within the confines of our own nuclear community. Instead, Rabbi Sacks challenged us to take responsibility for the societies around us and contribute meaningfully.
One of the greatest opportunities I had with Rabbi Sacks was, together with Rabbi Genack and Rabbi Posner, having the ability to print his works, his weekly parsha, whether it was the year that he attacked the issue of ethics, the year that he attacked the issue of leadership, or the year that he tackled the issue of the Jewish contribution to civilization and humanity. And to take them, edit them, and put them together as a unit, and then enable this for the next number of centuries, people to see the world differently, to see the Torah differently, and to see themselves differently, that was an incredible opportunity.
Rabbi Sacks was running out of the president's office at Yeshiva University. He was late for an event. Everybody was moving him along, trying to get there. He spotted me. I was moving in another direction. He stopped me, said, "Josh, I'm remembering our last conversation together. It had been several months ago, maybe even a year." He said, "How are you doing?" I'd been working through a personal family health issue. And he stopped me and remembered, everybody's rushing him. "How's it going?" I said, "Baruch Hashem, we've passed the critical stage and we're doing a lot better." And he looked at me and he stopped and he said, "I feel like there's something more. Just remember, I tell the story. I went to the doctor and he tested how I was doing while I was exercising. And then after I stopped exercising, he tested my heart rate again. Even after the event, after the trauma, after the crisis, we have to monitor ourselves. We have to watch our heart rate. Our resilience is important in our recovery." I learned a couple things that day. Number one, even when you're rushing somewhere, stop. Ask yourself, ask others, how are you doing? And second, as we're recovering from Rabbi Sacks's Ptira, Zichron Tzadik Livracha, remind ourselves to test our heart rates even today.
I witnessed and learned two critical lessons from Rabbi Jonathan Sacks. First, the timeless relevance of the Torah's wisdom to current challenges. Whether discussing policies to address poverty, education, healthcare, or foreign affairs, I saw Rabbi Sacks speak to policymakers in a rabbinic voice, not the voice of another politician or pundit. And second, that the power of that voice, Rabbi Sacks's voice, came from its being anchored in authenticity.
This was his greatness, the balance between the particular and the universal, to really be concerned about the individual, but never forgetting about the vast world around him and around his communities.
He left a quote with me that I think about all the time. He said, "Good leaders create good followers. great leaders create great leaders. Something to remember about leadership.
The first thing I asked him was, what do we do about the fact that parts of the Torah don't seem to fit so well into modern day thought? And he said to me, how hard is it to change corporate culture? I said, very hard. He said, well, how much harder is it to change world culture? And the reality is that the Torah was given in a much more cruel and uncivilized world 3,000 years ago, and it was embedded with tools so that we could, over time, evolve the world into a kinder and more equal world. And so this lesson is something that I think about often, and something that I've taught to other people often in his name.
He was Rabbi Sacks, probably the most sought-after speaker in the Jewish community, at the top of his game. Was interested in constantly improving and working on and refining his craft, and didn't see it as good enough, but was constantly looking to do better.
I remember vividly the winter of 2001 in the UK when B'nai Akiva in the UK ran National Weekend, which was a very courageous effort to draw together children and campus from across the country for a Shabbaton in Wales. And on Friday night, as 1,000 and something campus sat together in a freezing cold dining room, eating our Shabbos dinner, Rabbi Sacks got up on his chair and started to sing, and one by one, everyone got up in their chair and started to sing, and the room was electric.
He came to speak at the NCSY staff conference. And at the end, there was a Q&A session where one of the supporters raised the question, why aren't more philanthropists helping support the Jewish future? Why aren't they giving to help bring Jews closer? At that moment, I saw Rabbi Sacks do something I'd never seen him do before. He looked to the ground in contemplation and waited. Then he looked up and replied, you find the philanthropist, and I'll come with you to convince them.
On one occasion, I remember asking Rabbi Sacks if he'd ever felt under pressure from critics or controversies or circumstance to escape the weight of his office or flee the publicity of the limelight. And he thought for a moment and he said, let me be as honest as I can. 3,000 years ago, Jacob wrestled with an angel over the course of a long, dark night. But even at sunrise, he refused to let go until he received a blessing. And there are many times, he said, that he suffered the pressures of public life. And we all, to some degree, struggle against challenges, both great and small. But he said that our faith calls us. The very name of our nation charges us to wrestle a blessing and keep fighting. And in every challenge that I've faced ever since, the words uttered by a mentor who had his share of struggles have resounded in my mind, anchored my soul, and inspired me to wrestle a blessing from the encounter and keep fighting.
Every semester he would give us a full day from 9 to 4, which we would divide into 20-minute slots which he would spend with students. Any student who wanted to spend time with him, he would be there for them. There was never any email to the community I put out which would get quicker responses than the one which said, who wants time with Rabbi Sacks?
It was such an incredible experience getting to meet Rabbi Sacks and sit with him in his home and learn from him. While we were there, Rabbi Sacks spoke to us about issues that he believes were facing both the British and global Jewish communities, as well as shared with us words of Torah. I remember that he took our questions and opinions so seriously and really welcomed us into his home with so much warmth.
Beyond the keynoting major conferences and rousing and inspiring crowds of thousands, what he really loved, what he truly loved during his time at Yeshiva University, was the moments he spent one-on-one with students.
In 2016, Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks, Zichrono Livracha, came to the city of Toronto for a couple of very short days. His schedule was very, very busy, and he was torn by the community who was pulling him in all so many different directions. Rabbi Sacks insisted that he spend half a day at York University, and I had the opportunity to spend those hours with him, taking him to and from the campus. Rabbi Sacks told me, do you know why I'm dedicating half of a day, way more time than in any other engagement, to come to the university campus? Because the Jewish students are the Ikar. They are the essence. They are the present of the Jewish people. They're the future of Am Yisrael, the future of the Jewish people.
We're forever indebted to Rabbi Sacks for the spread of his outstanding and high-level Torah learning, and we can only hope that we do it justice as we pass it on to the next generation.
We will truly miss you, Rabbi Sacks, but you will always be our Rebbe.
Baruch Dayan HaEmes, his loss will be felt for many years to come.
I feel the loss of a Rebbe, of a teacher, of someone who was a role model for excellence, for outstanding thinking, for clear thinking, for hardworking, for intense reading, and I miss him.
I will miss him and his work incredibly, deeply. He's Zichro Baruch.
I not only say may, but I say with confidence that Rabbi Sacks' memory will be a blessing and an inspiration to all of us.
We miss Rabbi Lord Sacks and will continue to look to him not only as a guide, but for having set the bar for who we could be and the difference that every one of us can make.
His loss is an enormous loss for Klal Yisrael and beyond. Yehi Zichro Baruch.
Yehi Zichro Baruch.
May his memory be for a blessing.
Yehi Zichro Baruch.
May his memory be a blessing.
Yehi Zichro Baruch.